collaboration with the Cyprus Mail. This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
Coming up on this week's programme, does Cyprus' particularly ageing housing stock meet anti-seismic regulations and standards?
The existing building stock that is aging and it lacks this modern construction standard and techniques. But it's mostly because it lacks maintenance and because as a people in Cyprus we don't have the culture of maintenance and of fixing our buildings and any problems that we see in the building.
Cuvier's beaked whales have been found stranded on the Cyprus coast.
We had 7 strandings, unfortunately, and there have been reports from the occupied areas of 3 strandings.
And a pan-European directive comes into force forbidding the use of lead shot for hunters near wetlands.
We do not have a lot of wetlands in Cyprus, but where we do have, it's important that we follow the European directions.
When the dreadful earthquake in Turkey and Syria hit last week, I think everybody in Cyprus, apart from being shocked and horrified by the damage that was done in those areas, brought to mind the fact that we too have earthquakes in Cyprus and how safe are our houses? Now, you may recall that several months ago I spoke to somebody from the technical chamber in Paphos about collapsing balconies, and we did discuss how well maintained our housing is in Cyprus. According to data from the statistical services released in 2019, nearly half of the houses built then were built before 1994, when the law on mandatory anti-seismic surveys was passed. So exactly how much of a problem could it be that our housing stock is old and possibly, if a bigger earthquake occurred nearer to the island, unsafe? We're joined on this week's programme by Pladonas Stylianou from ETEK, that's the technical chamber here in Nicosia. Pladonas, thanks very much indeed for joining me, and I know that ETEK, I've talked to them many times over the years, are quite concerned about how well maintained our buildings are here in Cyprus. So what do you make and what are you going to do, if you can, about the shock that this has been, and presumably also to the government departments responsible?
Yes, thank you for that. We are in close contact with the Parliament and the government on this issue, because as you very well explained before, the majority of the existing building stock in Cyprus, but also in most European countries, was built in the 80s and 70s, and it lacks modern design standards, including the requirement for the seismic safety. So one of our most important concerns is the human life, and is to possess safe and sound building, which is one basic human right in our belief as a tech. And that is why we are in close contact with the Parliament in order to see how we can keep this building stock in an operational, reliable and resilient way in order to ensure the safety of the user.
Can you tell me a little bit about the 1994 law and the anti-seismic legislation that came in then? Because it's not too difficult, is it, to upgrade existing buildings?
Well, the first anti-seismic code was introduced in 1994. It's the Cyprus Seismic Code, which was introduced at that time after all the relevant experience that was gathered from European earthquakes and mostly from the Athens big earthquake. So in 1994, the first Cyprus anti-seismic code was introduced. Later on, in 1999, it was the mandatory inspection of all buildings was introduced for architects and civil engineers. And in 2012, we had the implementation by law of the Eurocode, and especially of the Eurocode 2018, which is the earthquake law, which has to do with the earthquake and the relevant earthquake areas of the various parts of Europe, because some countries in Europe do not have earthquakes. So we have the various parts of the Euro codes, which is from 1990 until 1999. The earthquake code is Euro Code 8 in 1998, which is specially designed for the countries that they do have earthquakes. So we have different big ground acceleration for Cyprus, different for Greece, different from Italy. It depends on the various countries and how they are seismically prone to earthquakes.
So the risk factor, basically. Now, I live in an old listed mud brick house, and when we renovated, we had to ring band it for earthquakes. Can you explain how that works, and indeed the new construction methods that are required to make sure that new builds are up to scratch?
Yeah, the mud bricks construction, it's a very good construction technique. It's not a bad technique. The adobe, which was used in Cyprus for many years, these adobe walls, the masonry walls made out of mud bricks or adobe walls, as we used to call them in Cyprus, plethari walls, are very good and very earthquake-resistant walls if they are constructed in the good construction techniques with and used to work as a diaphragm wall and have a good box behavior. But the new buildings that are built according to these earthquake codes, the Euro Code 8, are different, and this is mainly for RC concrete, reinforced concrete construction, for steel construction, for masonry construction. There are different parts of these earthquake codes for different parts of the methodologies and construction techniques. It's something that we didn't have before. The first Cyprus earthquake code that was used in 1994, it was only for reinforced concrete buildings. The new codes now, the earthquake, they have the Euro codes, they have all these elements, and you can find a lot of information regarding different construction techniques. Now, the problem, according to our studies in EDEC, is it's mainly about the old buildings, the existing building stock that is aging and it lacks these modern construction standard and techniques. But it's mostly because it lacks maintenance, and because we don't have, as a people in Cyprus, we don't have the culture of maintenance and of fixing our buildings and any problems that we see in the building. And that is why in EDEC we have created the building visual inspection forms, which is NOAOSX, which is some special forms, some special checks that they have to be created and checked by civil engineers in order to help them and help the people to have a building visual inspection, a standard inspection form that is developed to serve as a tool for ensuring that the basic requirement to protect the safety of the user is done and checked.
But is it the owner of the building that has to ask for that inspection to be carried out, or is the government doing it routinely?
At the moment, it's the owner of the building, but we are trying as a EDEC to make it by law in order to be regularly inspected, in order to help, because as I said before, we lack this culture of maintenance and of regular inspection. It's better if it's enforced by law at the first start, but mainly for the buildings that they have a lot of buildings, and it's for the safety of the building and the public safety. So we should first start for the public buildings, and then we should continue with the private building as well.
So there's no government department that is responsible for checking this?
No, unfortunately no.
That's very worrying, particularly when you see the buildings that we saw on the television of Turkey collapsing like pancakes, one on top of the other. And I want to ask you as well, Pladonas, The earthquake that just happened was felt in many areas of Cyprus. I know my house shook for a minute and it was very scary. But has it possibly caused some damage to the older buildings that isn't visible? Are they weakened by events like this?
The earthquake it's a very unpredictable phenomenon that it's causing mostly damage to previously not maintained buildings. So if you have a building that is not safe, that is not well maintained, that has already deficiencies, and then you have an earthquake, then this building is going to be hit first and it's going to suffer more from that earthquake. And that is why we need preventive measures and we need to culture this systematic maintenance of buildings in order to help the safety of the users.
And anybody in the neighbourhood, I imagine. What about all these high-rise buildings that are now going up in many areas of Cyprus? I believe that if you live in the top of one of them, it sways like crazy during an earthquake. But how safe is it to build multi-storey buildings in an area that is prone to earthquakes?
I think if they are built after 2012, which most of these high-rise buildings are built after the Euro codes, then they are well designed, well developed. So I don't think there is any need to have to create panic to people for that, because they are up to standards with these latest codes, the Euro codes. So they have the modern techniques, the modern construction techniques. They have the state-of-the-art technology, and they have good codes that if it's followed and done properly, there should be no problem for those buildings.
All right, let me finally ask you what, if anything, apart from meeting yet again with Parliament or indeed the new government, ETEC can do to try and ensure that there are routine safety checks on our housing stock.
As ETEC, as the technical chamber of this country, it's of primary importance for us. So we will write a letter to the new president and the parliament after they will start again work after March, in order to have this inspection, the regular inspection of building as a mandatory, in order to help all the citizens to do this building visual inspection with the forms created by ETEC, and in order to create this culture of maintenance and of regular inspection to the society and to help the safety of the people.
Well, one would assume, actually, that the new government, if it isn't willing to create a department or task an already established department with doing this, that, like it's given so many incentives to people to buy electric cars or bicycles or whatever, it could give an incentive to cover some of the cost of these inspections, couldn't it?
Yes, exactly. And we have already written a lot of letters calling them to give these incentives. We have also created a lot of seminars in order to make our civil engineers more familiar with this. We have created these visual inspection forms that we have created them, and they are already uploaded to the ETEC website, and it's given to all the engineers and the civil and the citizens of Cyprus for free. You can download them from our website of ETEC, and anyone can use them. So we did as much as we could at the technical chamber. Now we are waiting for the parliament and the government to do their own job.
Okay, so are you saying that if I live in a block of flats that was built perhaps immediately after 1974, when a lot of new construction went up in a hurry, if I was living in one of those buildings and thinking maybe it's not as safe as it should be, can I download your visual inspection sheet and have a look around myself, or does it take an expert eye?
It's better if you have an expert eye for doing this, but it's good for you as well to download it, have a look at it, and you can read it and understand some of the methodologies and and the procedure are given there, but you need a civil engineer in order to fill it, have an inspection and sign it and give you the results of that.
Okay, but it might give me an indication as to whether I should call a civil engineer.
Exactly, yes. It's good to download it and have an indication and have a first check and see, maybe this is good, this is not, and then call the civil engineer to do the scientific check on behalf of you.
So we send everybody to, what, is it etek.com.cy? What's the website?
Yes.
etek.com.cy. Pladonas Stylianou, many thanks.
Thank you.
This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
There were stories in the newspapers last week about a number of whales beached in the Paphos area of Cyprus. Now, I've been here a very long time. I can't recall this ever happening before, although I'm sure occasionally it has. So I'm joined on this week's programme by Lavrentis Vassiliadis of the Marine Environment Division of the Department of Fisheries and Marine Research. Lavrentis, has it happened before?
Well, from our records, Rosie, we did have a stranding of the species, Cuvier beaked whale, in 2001 in the Akamas area, in relation to that area, but also in 2002 in a Limassol area. So there have been beaked whales stranded in Cyprus, and also in 2022, last year, we had in Paphos again in Mandria, we had a stranding of the same species. So it has happened before, but not at the scale of this stranding, which is it's a mass stranding.
How many actually have been stranded in the last week or so?
Well, I can only comment on the strandings that have happened in the areas that are controlled by the Republic of Cyprus. So we've had 7 strandings, unfortunately, and there have been reports from the occupied areas of 3 strandings.
What is it that causes whales to do this? Because I know that there's a possibility and some reflection in the press about whether or not the recent earthquakes could have disoriented them. But if it's happened before, even on a small scale, there must be other things at play, surely.
Well, previous papers that I've had a look at have mentioned that anthropogenic effects, like naval exercises or surveys for hydrocarbons, can affect the whales and can make them surface quickly, which will lead them to be damaged. The diver sickness, if you know what that is.
The bends, do they get that?
Bends. Yes, they do get the bends
Wow.
if they surface quickly, because there are deep diving whales. They can dive to depths larger than 2,000 meters. So at that depth, if they get affected by a severe noise, because they're very sensitive to underwater noise, they might surface quickly, and that might lead them to get the bends. That's one of the reasons. There are other reasons that might affect them, like a virus, but because of the number, I think it's unlikely that it was a virus. We have collected samples from the strandings, and they will be going to Greece, with which we have a collaboration with a non-government organization in Greece to look at the samples and hopefully find what was the reason for this mass stranding.
How soon do you think you can get the results?
I can't comment exactly on how long it will take for the results, but there is a procedure for protected species under CITES obligations that the Department of Environment needs to give us a permit for the transportation of the samples. So it will take some time for us to get the approval, and then they will go to Greece to be analyzed in the laboratories and hopefully get the results as soon as possible.
Do we have any idea how many of these Cuvier's beaked whales we have in the Mediterranean?
They're the most common whale in the Mediterranean, actually. There are various reports. I wouldn't like to say exactly the number that we have in the Mediterranean, but it is in the thousands. Not the large thousands, but it is in thousands.
And I suppose because they're such deep water creatures, we very rarely see them, do we?
Exactly. We don't have a lot of information on this species in the Mediterranean. When the Department of Fisheries did the survey for cetaceans in 2016 and 2017, we did notice them or record them basically from the sounds. And there are some pictures from civilians that have been sent to the department to the various years that we record them for sightings. So we know that they are in the area, but we don't know the exact population size.
How many different whale species are there in the Mediterranean? I know we see dolphins quite often, but not whales so very often.
No, we have more than 8 species in our part of the waters, but there's more species in the Mediterranean as a whole.
Now, I know that the villagers in the Argaca region, I believe, managed to take a few of the whales that were stranded back out to sea, but they then came back again. Is that usual?
No, it means that the whales have a severe effect on whatever has affected them, so unfortunately they could not recuperate. The same thing as I've read on Facebook pages happened in the occupied areas where they took the whales quite out at sea, but unfortunately they resurfaced on the beach. So whatever affected them had a severe effect.
Yeah, because if it was the bends, you'd think that if they'd been up for a while, might they have recovered? Do we have any information on that? Or were they so badly distressed, I suppose we should say, by whatever caused them to come to the surface, that lasts for a long time?
I think so, yes. I don't know the specifics of how it affects these animals, but I know for humans that when they have effect of the bend, they need to go into the decompression chambers. So there is a procedure for humans, but I don't know the details on these animals. It
would have to be a very big decompression chamber for a whale, I suppose.
It's not possible, and it's a large animal. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the civilians that assisted in trying to save the whales and push them back to sea. But it is very difficult to save them when they've been affected or stressed so much.
And I presume that because this has happened, you're on the lookout, are you, for any more possible strandings?
The department and the Department of Forest and the veterinary services have been closely monitoring ever since we had the report of the first stranding. So we are scouring the area and having a look out to see if there are any other strandings.
Hopefully there won't be. So do let us know when you get the results back of those samples that you took, because it will be very interesting to know exactly what caused this and whether or not there's any way in the future to try and prevent another situation like this.
Of course. We will be making it known when we get the results of what has affected these whales.
Thank you very much indeed. That is Lavrentis Vassiliadis of the Marine Environment Division of the Department of Fisheries and Marine Research, telling us about those beached Cuvier's beaked whales. Very sad.
Yes.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
As of Wednesday this last week, lead-shot ammunition is illegal to be used in wetlands across the European Union. Joining us on this week's programme is the President of the Hunting Federation, Ilias Beklis. Ilias, this is something I think you've known about for a long time, because it has been, I think, illegal in Cyprus to use lead pellets in the vicinity of wetlands because of the damage it causes to the birds particularly. So how are you going to make sure that all your members comply with this?
Yes, it is something that we have in mind for a long time now, and we are in talks with the government in Cyprus and the European Union about it. It seems a bit odd that the European Union is usually mostly having in mind the hunting and the fishing impact of the lead in the wetlands and not all the other problems. However, we as a federation, as a responsible organization, we are already informing our members through seminars that they have to follow the new rules applying. And we do not have a lot of wetlands in Cyprus, but where we do have, it's important that we follow the European directions in the Cyprus law.
Now, I understand that a survey conducted in 2021 showed that about half Cypriot hunters didn't know that there was an alternative to lead pellets. I mean, they've been around for a long time, haven't they, the alternatives?
There are alternatives. They are not as such good for hunting, and some other alternatives are much more expensive for the cartridges in hunting. However, it is very important that if there is a law in Cyprus, we have to obey the rules, and this is what we're trying to do as a federation all this time. The last 6 months to 8 months, we're trying to have door-to-door informative papers and seminars to our members so they know and they will not break the law.
Is lead ammunition going to still be available here for use in other areas? Because we all know that lead, wherever it falls, is a pollutant.
Yes, it is still in place and is going to be used. If I'm not mistaken, there is a plan in the European Union. It is planning to ban lead generally in cartridges, not only in hunting but also in the shooting athletic events. And this, if I'm not mistaken, will be in place after 2028. It is creating problems to the environment sometimes, but it is important for us to communicate to people that the percentage that the cartridges of the hunters are creating problems to the environment is less than 2%. More importantly, see other aspects of pollution through lead instead of just targeting the hunters. It seems like it's a targeted event for the hunters especially and the fishermen.
Well, I don't know about that, but if you look at the situation in Lake Soros in Meneu, there's a huge problem there because samples have been taken to show that it's very badly polluted with lead. And so people have been using lead pellets actually in an area where they're not supposed to at all, and that's the area, I believe, where protected birds have also been killed in large numbers.
For once, it's important for us to say that it is illegal to use in wetlands now lead, and nobody should use in wetlands lead. This is one place, Lake Soros, that I know about myself. This is, if I say, one of the few hunting areas in Cyprus that there is wetland. Most of Cyprus, most of the habitat in Cyprus and the hunting places, they do not have wetlands. So we need to reconsider on how to use lead, if we use lead, and how to find an alternative, if it's possible to find an alternative that has the same result as lead in hunting, has the same speed in shooting events, and at the same time is not going to be so expensive.
All right, we're running short of time. I have one last question for you, and that is, how can the Hunting Federation help with this? I mean, do you check when somebody applies for their licence that they are fully cognizant of A, the law, and B, you also say you're an environmental federation, of what is required to protect the environment? Because if we don't do that, there won't be any species left to hunt.
Yes. It is important. We are an environmental organization as well, but we need to understand that we are not issuing the licenses for the hunters ourselves. The licenses are issued in Cyprus by the Fauna Service. It's a governmental organization, and we are not the ones that are giving the licenses to the hunters.
But just a minute, can I, as a hunter, join your federation?
Mm-hmm.
So
yes,
when I want to join your federation, that's when you have the chance to make sure that I'm aware of what I should be doing.
What we are doing seminars all year round about everything, about environmental impacts of hunting, if there is any, about of how to react and act when you are in the environment, first aid, and a lot of different seminars that we give all year round. A member of a federation needs not to be a hunter. We have members that are not hunters, and they love the environment and they want to help when we do voluntary work in the environment.
Well, that's great news. We have to end it there, Ilias. I'm sure we could talk again in the future, but we're very short of time on this week's programme. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you very much.
Ilias Pekris, who is the president of the Hunting Federation. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.